I stayed up all night studying. Like, we have research now that says that's a bad idea. So we can't stack 4 or 5 hour nights of sleep with no negative impact. So we need to be reminded.
This has never been my struggle.
If you guys don't know Anna is an amazing sleeper. Would you please give us just a quick glance into the life
I
of Anna?
am just here to advocate for sleep and how important it is, you guys, because I feel the effects of not sleeping. It's very real in
Just
my
talking
body.
about it.
I know that it's very real. And I think even like Nathan is somebody who you would, I feel like, especially in your younger years,
Oh, really?
you could get away with less sleep. And I think now, as you've matured,
This is not going well for me.
you feel the ramifications of 4 hours. Whereas
Sure,
in your
yes.
20s, you could get away with back-to-back nights of 4 hours of
I'm
sleep.
still in my 20s.
You're still so young and
So
fresh.
young and svelte.
But whereas I have never been able to get away with that.
No.
Like,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan,
I'm Anna.
and we are here today to talk about how we can reestablish our tech boundaries around sleep. If you're not familiar with Gospel Tech is a podcast designed to help families better love God and use tech. It is a branch of Flint and Iron, a nonprofit Anna and I started a couple years ago, focused around sparking positive purpose in youth. I'm really excited for us to have this conversation today because we get to kind of dive a little bit into this area of sleep, something that especially in our modern culture, in our day and age, with a lot of digital taps happening in our brain, we can get distracted from. So I think with that kind of groundwork laid, let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech.
Thanks to everybody who's listening. We're so glad that you're here and going to be part of this conversation today. We really appreciate you listening. And if you haven't yet, we would love it if you could leave us a rating. Just click those stars, and if
all the stars.
And if you want to leave a review, that would be amazing too. That's how people find us on whatever service you're listening on. It just helps spread the word. So we would really appreciate that. And thanks to everybody who already has done that. If you want more information on anything that we're talking about today or on the work that we're doing through Gospel Tech, you can find us on Instagram.
On the social medias.
On the socials. And on Instagram, it's at Flint and Iron. And on Facebook,
it's at Sparking Purpose.
We're working on
and
that.
Those are both going to actually be changing. We're going to swap them over to Gospel Tech shortly. Spoiler alert, but there's a website and brand shift.
It's coming.
It's
coming. Or just send us an email. You can email Nathan at flintandiron.org, or you can email me, Anna, at flintandiron.org.
Email her. She would love that.
I'd be happy to get an email.
Yeah.
Okay, on to our quick little icebreaker here. What are you reading or listening to that's having an impact on you right now?
Oh man, we have started reading the news because I had dropped off the map on that, and I've been trying to get more intentional about consuming that. But since I can't read off the World Wide Webs because I am a sucker for clickbait, we have gone to paper newspapers, and that's been great. I've enjoyed like actually sitting down a couple nights a week and like intentionally ingesting information. And we went specifically with 2 different kind of groups, knowing that information is biased, but trying to get it biased from well-informed sources, I guess is how you put that. So that's been really good. And that's kind of helped me work through kind of how do we have conversations, especially in America and around U.S. Issues and politics. How can we be both informed and empathetic and not just cynical and jaded? So that's been big.
That's good.
For the reading. Listening. Oh, I've been doing, I just finished The Case for Christ, actually, on audiobook, which was really good. If you guys haven't read it, it's probably one of those books people have been telling you since you were like 12 to read. It actually is good. Do read it. It's not as cheesy as I expected it to be. It's actually quite helpful. How
Good.
about you?
I am rereading The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry with our little book club, and that's been a good one. I really like John Mark Comer. He's out of Portland, and I feel like just very tangible reminders and ways to be challenged on living like Jesus lived.
Awesome. I'm glad that's been useful. I really like what he does. So today we're going to be talking about reestablishing sleep.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I believe, episode 11 of our Reestablishing Tech series. And today we're going to really do three things. You actually wrote these down. Would you like to read through those?
Sure. We're going to talk about sleep in kind of three components. We're going to start with the biblical model for rest and rejuvenation that we see. That's kind of our big foundation, that this isn't just something that the modern world says is important. And then second, we're going to look at the science behind sleep. And third, we're going to look at how our own and our children's tech disrupts sleep.
Yeah, which I don't know about you guys, but sleep is going to be one of those things that I have to faithfully trust the Lord in, because it's one of those things that I love to just, well, I can stay up a little bit longer and I can push myself a little bit more, either for work or for fun or for me time or just worrying. And so rest is given to those who trust the Lord. And we see that. And so we need to rest in that. So, yeah. So we know it's important for ourselves. We know it's important for our children. And yet we push it back to the back burner for a lot of reasons. But like a lot of facets of tech that we talk about here, we need to step back and consider what the big picture goals are for ourselves and for our family.
Yeah. I think if we're looking at what our main goal is, and I think for me and Nathan, we talk a lot about how our goal is to glorify God and to enjoy Him, then every decision we make, we're not saying we do this perfectly, but if this is in an ideal state, is that we're trying to live our lives to glorify God and to enjoy Him, then every decision we make would hopefully line up with that. And that can even comes down to our sleep. And if we're honoring God with how we're spending our time, and are we recognizing our limitations as humans? And we're going to talk today specifically about our kids, because I feel like that's easier sometimes. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, I'm not ready to not have my phone in my bedroom, or you have a TV in your bedroom and that you're cringing, like, please don't tell me to not have my TV in my bedroom. We're just going to talk about your kids' TV in their bedroom today, or
You
their
can extend as much as you want.
Yes, whatever you want to apply to yourself, great. We're going to start with our kids, of just getting tech out of their bedrooms. Their minds and brains are still in full development mode. They're very fresh and malleable. So we want to kind of focus in our efforts on our kids today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So let's jump in then. So we're talking about a biblical model for sleep. I think just kind of when we talk about a biblical model for something, it means we actually see it referenced. So like there's not a biblical model for internet searching, right? Like we don't have that. There are things we can make connections to, right? It talks about the foolish youth hanging out on the wrong corner at the wrong time of day. Like that's a thing we can learn from. But in this case, like sleep is directly referenced in the Bible. And we will be going back to kind of some Old Testament stuff for some of that. But just to remember that a lot of those Old Testament rules, while they're no longer the source of our righteousness, like especially when it comes to moral commandments, meaning you had the law, which was like you can only walk so many steps on a Sunday kind of stuff. This is moral commandments, meaning there will be no murder in heaven still. Like that's still something God believes in, even though the law isn't how we find our righteousness. So we do just want to talk about this. Isn't how can we stack on rules and do better and then feel like we're better than other people because we have it. It's how can we accept the full blessing of what God's given us and not strive for stuff that's already ours in Christ. So that's kind of where we're starting with this.
Yeah, and this isn't in our notes, but I think that sometimes when we push that sleep boundary of, I'm just going to stay up a little later, I'm going to do one more thing, I'm going to send this quick email, I think we like to think that we can just squeeze it all in.
Yeah.
And we're not, I think that's reflective of not living or not having our hearts be content and at rest with what's happened during the day, and just kind of accepting our limitations and that we are not God, that we have to go to sleep.
Yes. We're part of creation. Like
yes.
Everything has to sleep. When we look at this, we have this idea that that this is an area God shows us our limitations is sleep, right? In addition to it being a limitation, we also see David talking about how this is a blessing from the Lord. Sleep is not a punishment. We are not being forced into something we don't want to do. Like sleep is sweet and it is wonderful and it's a gift from God, and it is positive on so many levels. But when we talk about it, America, we often think of like, well, I'm proud of how little I sleep. I know in college and in work that was a thing, right? Like, oh, I stayed up all night studying. Like, we have research now that says that's a bad idea. So we can't stack 4 or 5 hour nights of sleep with no negative impact. So we need to be reminded.
This has never been my struggle.
If you guys don't know Anna is an amazing sleeper. Would you please give us just a quick glance into the life
I
of Anna?
am just here to advocate for sleep and how important it is, you guys, because I feel the effects of not sleeping. It's very real in
Just
my
talking
body.
about it.
I know that it's very real. And I think even like Nathan is somebody who you would, I feel like, especially in your younger years,
Oh, really?
you could get away with less sleep. And I think now, as you've matured,
This is not going well for me.
you feel the ramifications of 4 hours. Whereas
Sure,
in your
yes.
20s, you could get away with back-to-back nights of 4 hours of
I'm
sleep.
still in my 20s.
You're still so young and
So
fresh.
young and svelte.
But whereas I have never been able to get away with that.
No.
Like even in
We got married and you were going to bed at 9:15 p.m.
I was getting up at 4:30 to
I
go
normally
work.
went to bed at 2. Like
right,
that was
but you could go to bed at 2 and get up at 4:30 and you were okay. And if I don't get 8 hours, I'm a bear.
yeah. And you get a migraine, in fairness. You do.
Right,
you do,
my
like,
body
your body
doesn't let
collapses.
me
Microchip.
not sleep, but you guys, it's so important.
It's so important. So we are, and then for me, like I am the guy who'd start like ironing shirts at 1 a.m. because I'm like, I'm just awake. I'll do this. So here's what we're gonna consider our goals based on the Bible, right? That our biblical model, while there are things that talk about sleep and set that up in the Bible as positive, we have to remember that our goal is to glorify God, right? That God is glorified in our weakness. So we're coming out of 2 Corinthians 12:9 there. But also that we are these jars of clay that when we go, well, what does it mean to glorify God? Like I do a bunch of good stuff and God's impressed. Like, no. It actually specifically makes it clear. Paul writes wonderfully that we are jars of clay, that we're carrying around this treasure of God, the Holy Spirit inside of us. And when we are smashed and broken, that's when God spills out of us, right? That's the idea of us being a jar of clay. We are not a beautiful, golden vessel that is impressive on a shelf. Like we are common vessels intended to be broken. Jars of clay would have like meat cooked to them and then would be smashed afterwards, right? Like that is our process, that our intention is to be broken for Christ. And so as we think about our sleep, then pursuing sleep is an acceptance of our weaknesses. It's a humble action and it is something we can faithfully do. And if we can't do that in good conscience, we need to ask about where our priorities are and what's going on in our life. And are we in just a season of busyness? Like starting a nonprofit has been a season of busyness and there have been sleepless times. But we know when those will end. We have a goal for that. We have it all set up.
Yeah, I think these are important conversations to have with, especially with older, like middle school, high school kids, and sleep gets pushed back as they start staying up later. But these are just important conversations to be having of, okay, what's our goal as a family? And for you, we want to be glorifying God. We want to be loving our neighbors. We want to do everything we do as we're working for the Lord. Yeah. And if you're seeing this child not sleeping, choosing to stay up, or especially like their phone is in their room, they're watching shows late at night, they're getting interrupted sleep because they can't not check Snapchat or whatever it is, then I think there's a conversation to be had of like, when you're not sleeping, your attitude is reflected. Right? Often that's how it shows up for me is my attitude gets real short and snippy. So I think these are just conversations to be having with especially your older kids of how a lack of sleep impacts our ability to glorify God in what they're doing and to be prioritizing that.
Well, and our ability to pursue God. And I think I'll end on this. Just like think about it. The last time you got 5.5 hours of sleep, 10 days in a row, right? Like your last child that you had or whatever that was, your new job. What's the first thing to go? Well, usually it's an early wake up is the first thing to go. Right? So, I'm going to bump back my wake up by half hour. I need that time. And then like, what's the next thing to go? Well, usually it's a quiet time or some kind of focused time in the morning where we can intentionally, we'll listen to worship music in the car and we might even pray while driving. But that time to quiet your heart and to remember scripture and to just praise God for who God is usually goes out the window because we're busy. We usually don't skip a shower. We usually don't skip, right, getting dressed. Like, we usually do these things that we consider necessities, brushing our teeth, but we will skip a quiet time because, well, God will understand. And it's not about pleasing God with that, really. Like, God asks us to have communion with him because it's good for us. He asks us to get rest because it's good for us. So just recognize that in our children, when they start getting sleep deprived because they're pushing themselves to the brink of mental wellness, we want to make sure we remind them that getting that time with God isn't just something we're going to squeeze in. Like, we have to create the life that allows for that quiet and rest without us passing out on our faces, because you can't do it with 2 hours of sleep. So,
Okay, so that's kind of our first little areas.
Our biblical model of kind of building that out.
Yep. And then the second thing we want to look at is the science behind why sleep matters, because it does. And this, I feel like, is especially important to share if your kids, you haven't already had this conversation with your kids. Like, they're smart. If you're saying, oh, you need to go to bed, you need to go to bed, and then you explain, like, let's look at what the science of sleep is and why it's so important, especially for teenagers, all children, but why it's so important. Like, they want to be informed, they want to learn, give them that credit and have this conversation with them. Okay, so kind of the first thing, this is from that book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but I loved this little fun fact that he includes. It says, in 1879, when Edison invented the light bulb, that made it possible, right, to stay up past sunset. Before that, though, the average person slept 11 hours a night.
Right.
So good. Now the average is 7. And I feel like that was good. Like, he has a little comment in there of, like, I used to read about all these, like, saints of the early church in America and be like, they would get up so early and spend all this time in prayer. Like, I'm such a bad Christian because I'm not spending 3 hours in prayer. And he's like, well, they were sleeping 11 hours a night. Like, you can only sleep for so long, and then the lights don't come on. You have nothing else to do. So sure, I have all this time to sit and read my Bible and pray.
Yeah.
The light bulb really did do a number.
It did. And I vividly remember we went several years ago to Rwanda, and we worked at an orphanage together for a couple weeks. And when you're there, like, they have some generators and stuff, but, like, lights go out. There are no city lights out in the mountains where we were. And so it's dark at like 7:30 every night, year round. And so by like 8:30 or so, like, people are turning in. And then it gets light out at like 6:30 or 7. And so you have this 12 hours of dark, basically, where it impacts, like, everyone's rhythms and norms. And we found we were getting a lot more rest out there. And so just that idea that this light bulb and our phones and our ability to keep ourselves artificially stimulated has impacted our ability to be consistent in this.
Yeah. Okay, so if we're talking specifically about teens, I think I know just their sister-in-laws, our friends with teens, like, sleep is a struggle, but there are real body changes happening for them. They do still require that 8 to 10 hours a night, but their circadian rhythms do change during adolescence. So if you're feeling like, oh, my teenager just wants to stay up so late and he won't go to bed. He used to always go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, and now he wants to stay up till midnight. Like, it's such a battle. That is a really normal part of adolescence. So as frustrating as that might be, like, that is kind of just a piece of it. And I feel like when in a lot of our research we were doing, that is one of the big pushes to change school start times. And hopefully it's a little bit, if you're online school right now, you can roll out of bed and log on at 8 o'clock. But normally high school kids have to be like up and at 'em at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's really rough for their, just what their bodies are doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just kind of, that's just some information for you.
Yep. And that's, I think, a huge one, right? That just that our bodies change, like, especially during, the puberty. There's the word I was looking for, in puberty, and all the hormones that are getting dumped on them. Like, we are going to see sleep cycles change, but to continue making a habit. And I loved this point. I was listening to a podcast about cycling, and these pro athletes are like, well, here's the deal. Sleep is super important. They talk about sleep nutrition. And they said, if you're not sleeping enough, don't just lay in bed for 3 extra hours because you're going to be like, oh, I can't sleep. You're going to get stressed out, build bad habits. So just add a half hour. So if you're sleeping 6.5 hours a night, make it 7. So go to bed a half hour earlier. And their point was, if you can fall asleep a half hour earlier, you do a half hour extra sleep every night for 7 days, like, you just increased your sleep by 3.5 hours, right? And then when you bump it to an hour a couple weeks later, like you just got an entire extra night of sleep by adding that 1 hour. So as we think about that, keep in mind that it can be baby steps. This isn't like lock your kid in the room at 8:30 and don't let them out till 6, but helping them work through this process. What does it look like to be healthy, and some of the reasons and the science behind it, which
Yeah, so some of the things, I feel like this is the little fun facts of what sleep is doing to your brain.
so good.
This is from the sleep doctor, who's
Dr. Oz's sleep doctor, which we have, there's other like more hard hitting research here too, but like this is a guy who does this for a living and is well renowned for his work.
Yes. So in all stages of life, the brain is active during sleep. It consolidates memories, processes emotions, it's refreshing cells, clearing out buildup of waste materials. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for complex thinking and decision making, which is so important and lacking in teenage boys, especially
already.
And emotional regulation is among the last areas of the brain develop, and this undergoes significant maturation during the teen years. So when all of those things, if your teens are not getting sleep, those things get really dysfunctional. So if they're really cranky or their emotions are out of control, like those are correlated.
Right. And we're talking specifically here about like how does it impact the brain. So let's run through a few. So Glossier et al. 2010, a lack of sleep is linked to depression and suicide. Matthew Walker 2017, a lack of sleep puts our body into fight or flight mode, which means you're getting hit with like adrenaline and survival hormones when you should be trying to sleep. This is also doubled up, we'll talk in the next section, by some of our digital tech, but we're talking about the National Institute for Health talking that kids need 9 hours of sleep, and that's for the correct number of REM cycles to get through. So that does not count that they're in their room for 9 hours. They have to actually fall asleep and be out for that long. So if they're waking up to check their phone, if they're getting up to do whatever, like those distractions are hampering their ability to get the sleep they need. And I think most importantly is the research it's in. We don't adapt. 2014, Podell et al. We do not adapt to a lack of sleep. So instead of just kind of, well, I'm getting used to, like I can get used to, I don't know, getting stung by nettles, you actually incur a sleep debt and your body begins to repay that with micro sleep. So this would be why you are sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden you don't know what was said for the last 6 minutes. Like your brain will actually shut off with your eyes open and it's just trying to survive. And that is where you get high levels of things like cortisol and negative hormones that are useful in survival situations, but not useful for information retention, anxiety, future sleep, and basically breaking down anything positive you're doing for your body. Like you could be great on your diet and exercise, but if you're not getting sleep, last one, research showing that just sleep difference. So two groups ate the same amount and worked out the same amount. So they were taking in the same amount of protein and carbs, but all they did was change the amount they slept. One group slept 5 hours, 5.5, I think, and the other group slept 9. And at the end, they both lost the same amount of weight from exercise, but the group with 5.5 hours consumed muscle and their body retained the fat. And the other group lost twice as much fat and retain the muscle. So just as we're talking, like this is not just, man, like I want you to learn in school, so go get your sleep. We're talking everything from their ability to mitigate aggressive behavior to their ability to put on muscle and be strong athletes. Like all of that is impacted.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. The third little and final area we're going to talk about is how our tech specifically disrupts our sleep, and then what can you do instead. So this first little nugget is from the Sleep Foundation. Just using any tech before bed, so a TV, a tablet, a smartphone, laptop, gaming, this delays the body's internal clock and it suppresses the release of melatonin, which is the hormone that helps you fall asleep. So that blue light that you hear about, that really does make a difference. The more you use that device before bedtime, or your kid is on that device before bedtime, the harder it is to fall asleep. It also delays the onset of REM sleep, reduces the total amount of REM sleep, and compromises alertness in the next morning. So it's not just, I can't fall asleep because I was watching TV for an hour before bed. It's the whole sleep cycle. It's your next day. And like what Nathan was just saying about the sleep deficit, that just adds up over time.
Yeah. Which is nuts. And
yeah.
so, I mean, some phones do have, like, if you have to be doing work, like most phones and computers have a night mode where they pull out a lot of that blue light, but you still have lights on in your house. They still have a blue range to them, and your body is still being artificially woken up. So we do want to just keep that in mind.
Yes. And Nathan said this a little bit, but there's just a lot of research that indicates that teens, especially who are on screens at bedtime or have them in their room and get less sleep because of that, leads to a greater risk for depressive symptoms. So a greater amount of times on social media, any internet surfing, TV, movies, gaming, it doesn't matter what it is, anytime on tech that's disrupting sleep is linked to a higher rate of depression. And sleep is a huge role in that. It's not just, oh, maybe it's a little impact. Like it's a very strong connection there.
Yeah, and even down to like how much they can learn. Nurture Shock, published by Bronson or written by Bronson and Merriman, excuse me, talks about the more you learn, the more sleep you need, and that a lack of sleep, I mentioned earlier, but cortisol is one of our stress hormones, and that actually directly impedes learning. So there's been studies done where two groups go and learn. So like the exercise people, they go and learn. They basically study a list of words. They do that every day over the course of 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, the only variable that actually was controlled was how much sleep they got. Everything else was just allowed free reign. And the group who had the controlled higher amount of sleep like tripled the score of the group who did not get as much sleep. Again, it was about a 5 to 9 hour range between the two. And so just the learning, like if our children are struggling in school, we need to look at their sleep patterns and we need to look at what is hampering that. And so if lights, phones, etc. are in the way, we need to lovingly take action and begin that conversation and inform them so that they can know what they're giving up and kind of do that cost analysis, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's probably the first step. So we're going to kind of talk about what can you do instead and how to have this conversation. But I think just talking about what we just said of like, well, what is our purpose as an individual? What's our purpose as a family? Making sure your kids we're all on the same page here, and then going over some of that science with them. Have them do their own research. Be a really fun parent and make them write you a paper on the importance of teen sleep.
Do it.
But
from 2 English teachers.
Yeah, have that conversation with them, share some of the research with them, and then really some of the practical things we can start doing. This is a hard and fast one, I think, for us. And if you want to DM us why your kid needs to have something in their room,
oh, please do.
We'd be happy to have that conversation. But there should not be phones in the bedroom. There should not be TVs, gaming systems, tablets, computers. None of it should be in the bedroom. There are a lot of reasons for that. We're just talking about how those things impact sleep today. Maybe a different day, we'll talk about why all those things should not be in the bedroom for other reasons. But even if the only thing you're going to tell your kid for why they're getting those things out of their room is because it's disrupting their sleep, I think that's valuable enough. Your sleep is so important. We're going to remove these things that are barriers.
And let's talk about what a few of those things are. Like, are we going to do that? Like when we say those that get those things, those electronics, those screens, because the research is basically kids 6 to 17, 72% of those kids have at least one electronic device in their room.
Oh, this also includes an old iPad.
Yep.
Okay, I feel like this is a sneaky one because kids will be like, I'm just looking at the old iPad so I can do, I'm reading, or
Sure.
I'm on the Kindle Fire and I'm reading.
Right.
Those things all have internet access, you guys. I feel like we've heard a lot of stories of like, oh, we just had it tucked away. This little thing was just tucked. Even the gaming device, like this was just tucked away in a cupboard and they don't really get it. Like, no, they do. They get it. And kids, if there's any way for a kid to get on the internet, they know how to do it.
Yeah, and there are so Amazon makes a really nice, the Paperwhite Kindle. If your kid is an avid reader and they use the library app and they are downloading books multiple times, like there are those kids that are just voracious readers. Get them a Paperwhite. Christmas is coming up. It's, $100, something like that. And that does not have a backlight. So you literally read it with a regular light on. And the Paperwhite basically pulls magnetized ink around the screen. So it lasts for weeks and weeks and weeks. And literally, if that thing was left there for perpetuity, and someone were to find it in 50 years, it would have whatever the last screen is on it because it literally pulled the ink there and then froze. So it's that kind of a analog. It's basically like a really fancy Etch-a-Sketch is really what it is. So that if your kid is an avid reader, there are workarounds where they don't have to use their phone or use their iPad or use something that is also a gaming device or also an entertainment platform or also a distraction. They can actually get an e-reader that isn't trying to upsell you every 15 minutes with notifications and such.
Yeah. Okay. So first, we're getting it all out of the bedroom. Second part of that is preferably 1 hour before bedtime, we put our tech to bed. So TV, we stop watching shows. We send our last text messages, whatever you need to wrap up conversation-wise on the phone, whatever last app, whatever it is, 1 hour before bedtime, that needs to get plugged in and turned off or wherever everybody's charging everything for the night so that your brain has that wind down time at the end of the day. The second thing, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm going to do it on this one, I believe, is where you're headed.
Okay, so we're getting it all out. We're putting it to bed. How am I supposed to wake up in the morning, Nathan? I don't know what to do without my phone.
Such a softball.
I'm not saying this, you guys, like I'm high and mighty. I fought this for a long time. Nathan uses the same alarm clock from high school because he's a saint.
I think we all know that's not true.
Had my phone by my bed for a long time, really because I did like the alarm clock, but also would get into a bad habit of checking stupid stuff I didn't need to look at before bedtime. And then because of this work that we're doing, he made me buy a real...
Nathan and his principles again.
He made me buy a real alarm clock. But I really do like this one, and I was really picky about what alarm clock. But it's $30 on Amazon. He's going to link it in the show notes for you.
So good, guys.
It doesn't light up. Like, I don't like to see the numbers at night. I don't want to know what time it is, but I can just tap it and it shows you it's battery operated, so you don't have to have a cord. It's simple on off. I am not techie, and I can figure out how to set it and turn it off. It's very easy. So I feel like you could buy that. Anybody who needs an alarm clock, you could get this. Or there's $7 options at Target.
There are. They tick, they click. Like we've tried a lot of
But maybe that
clocks.
doesn't bug you.
Yeah,
I just don't want that.
Man. There's some of them, they're really loud. But so it's the Lexon. You'll see it in the show notes. It is beautiful. Anna actually found this thing, and it is it runs off, I think, 2 AA batteries, and it makes it 6 months. Doesn't plug in.
And it gives you an alert before your batteries just die if you're worried about that feature.
If you're concerned about that. I will say, Anna mentioned that it doesn't glow. That means like the light turns off on it, but if you need to see what time it is or you wake up, want to know if it's time to get up or whatever, you can tap it and it will show you the numbers for like 5 seconds or whatever and then go dark again. So you don't constantly have like that part of your room just glowing as I have with my alarm that I have to put like under the bed because it just looks iridium blue the entire night or green or whatever color it is.
Yep. Okay. So that was number 3.
Use a real alarm clock.
Real alarm clock.
Boom.
Number 4, guarding our morning disciplines and teaching. I think this is so important to teach and model for our kids too. We're guarding our morning disciplines and our sleep patterns. One way you can do this is mute your notifications 1 hour before bedtime. So we're already going to put our stuff to bed, but you can set your phone to sleep mode or do not disturb. Like if I know we're usually upstairs and getting ready for bed by 10. So by 9 o'clock, I don't need to know anything that's happening on my phone after 9 o'clock. And then I'm usually done with my Bible reading, quiet time, whatever that's going to look like in the morning by 7. So at 7, I can set my phone to allow notification. I don't have, if you have them on.
If you have a smartphone.
Sure. If you have a smartphone, we can turn those back on and have whatever's popping up. You don't need anything to be popping up. But if you have notifications on and you like to get alerts on certain apps, then great. After you've done your quiet time, your Bible time, whatever that silence and solitude is looking like for you and for your kids or older teens we're talking about here. That's a good practice to instate also.
And then I think that last one is just reinstate reading. Do an old-fashioned printed book, which the libraries are at least opening in our area. That's been wonderful. You can even drive up. They like leave a bag out for you. You run and grab it. It's awesome. Or do the Paperwhite option and get your e-reader that isn't going to overstimulate you with the blue light. And really be intentional about making it a reader, not just I read for a while and then I watch YouTube or my favorite streamers or these other shows. And I guess really help delineate. I think we will all find, and Ann and I have found in the last 3 months of our little tech experiments at home and in evenings that we tack a lot of our joy onto our ability to get what we want when we want it. And when we're stuck kind of reading, it can almost feel like a downer until you do it. Like we enjoy it after it's done.
It's definitely, it's funny how it feels like a learned, like, yeah, it's been a learned discipline to make ourselves sit down and read in the evening when we've gotten really used to watching TV or being on our phones at night. And it's totally good. And I feel like we just wrestle through. We have so much reading we want to get done, and we want to read the paper and read all these books. It's just a lot easier to sit on your phone for half an hour or an hour. And then all of a sudden it's 10:30 and you're like, oh, I didn't read anything. But I found this is my book. You guys, is just full of good nuggets. This was so convicting. But John Mark Comer, again, coming at us, said with an hour of reading before bed, you could get through the entire Bible in 6 months. So when you're like, I know I just don't have time for that. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to read my Bible or read anything else. Like, oh, you might. You really might. And I think, too, just teaching your kids, like, they are going to revolt. If everyone's been used to watching TV or being on their phones in the evenings, don't think this is going to be an easy, immediate swap. It's going to take, I feel like I relate it to, we still have one kind of baby. But every time with the baby that you're like, okay, we got to get rid of the bottle. We got to get rid of the pacifier. We got to get rid of the crib, right? Whatever the thing is, it's always so much worse. Like, first I have to decide I'm ready for this fight before I do it. Like, if I'm not, like, my baby still has a bottle. You don't need to know how old she is. She's too old for the bottle, okay? But I haven't decided I'm ready for that fight. But I know with the boys, as soon as I decided I'm ready, great, my head's in the game. It might be a couple days. It might be a week or two of like, we're really going to battle it out, but I'm going to hold strong and we're going to make this happen. It's kind of one of those things of you have to get your head in the game and be ready to go and get everybody loaded up on awesome books.
And you got to be on the same team.
Yep.
You need a family framework. Like, you got to know where you stand before you just throw this out and go.
We're reading every night instead of watching TV.
Yeah. And your kid's like, I hate you guys. I'm moving to my friend's house.
Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't have to be punitive. That is not the goal here. The goal isn't to somehow move yourself back to a quote unquote better time of life where people were magically good. That's not it. The point is, we can show you that the Bible talks a lot about rest and that we have to trust in God for our good things. So when our rest is depleted and our hearts and souls cannot focus on God, that is not good. We're not bringing God glory. We're not enjoying God's goodness. We are stealing from ourselves the very good things He won for us in Jesus. So that's our biblical model. And then we go, all right, what's the science? There's tons of it. And then we go, all right, well, what are we doing? Like, well, we're actively inhibiting our ability to enjoy God and to get rest. And so one of those things is, let's remove some of that distraction that we often just naturally put at night. Like, that's not normal. That's not just fine. Like, it's something we need to push back against and go, all right, what of this is just enjoyment? We like the show. We're going to watch it. And what of this is, I didn't get up in 10 seconds, so Netflix started the next show, or YouTube just rolled into the, right? Like, what is it, just kind of this slothfulness that I'm feeding, and it becomes a habit, and then it becomes a norm and a tradition that
now it's impacting
our kids,
other areas of my life too.
Relationships, joy, all that
Sleep.
stuff. So sleep like that. So
yes,
all that. There was one more thing. Do you want to read the final piece?
No.
Okay. Then that's it.
We're going to save that for a different time.
Snap. Teaser alert. All right. So I think with that in mind, we just want to say, all right, where do you want to go, right? And how are we getting there? The family framework, if you just go gospeltechworkshop.com, it'll run you to the Gospel Tech online framework, online workshop where it's all designed to help you build a family framework. This idea that you're going to be fighting for your family, not just with them when it comes to tech. And basically there's 7 lessons to start talking about tech, kind of what we just did here, where we're going to be talking about things like sleep. You're going to learn how to delineate between tool tech and drool tech. And you're going to learn if your tech is healthy, using a reset, and apply those with your family. There's a workbook that comes along with it. That is, we're really excited. We worked real hard on this last year. So check that out. What that will then do is set you up to make the framework. And that's 9, and it's technically 9 separate videos, but one of them is like 90 seconds, right? So they're really tiny little bites so that you can go in there, do one step of making a family framework. So it's not this overwhelming massive thing where you have to, I don't know, write a dissertation for your family on technology. That's not the goal. So the goal is you guys be the best parents that God can have you be for your kids, and to love them well in this tech world. Anything else?
That's it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you guys for listening. Again, please do rate and review. If this has been helpful for you, share it with people that you think would be encouraged or even challenged by. We don't need everyone to like what they're hearing. We just want them to be informed in making loving decisions for their kids. If you have any questions, you can DM us. It's at Flint and Iron on Instagram, at Sparking Purpose on Facebook, or you can just good old-fashioned email Nathan or Anna, Nathan at flintandiron.org or Anna at flintandiron.org. Thank you guys for being a part of the conversation, and we look forward to continuing it next week as we work together to better love God and use tech.